We'll begin the meeting in 1 minute. On va commencer la réunion dans 1 minute. De March 2019. Bienvenue à la réunion du Conseil municipal pour le 27 mars 2019. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of personal reflection and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem. Standing, our colleague Councillor Brockington will introduce our very special guest who will sing our national anthem.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning. It is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome the Bayview Public School Choir with us today. Bayview Public School in River Ward is an early French immersion center located in the Hunt Club community on Owl Drive. The school serves students from junior kindergarten to grade 4 and currently has an enrollment of approximately 300 students. The school motto is respect, responsibility, and resource. Students, staff, and parents at Bayview work collaboratively to create a positive atmosphere that fosters respect, cooperation, and success. And I know this firsthand as my oldest daughter, Hannah, went to Bayview, and Katie, my second daughter, who's in the choir, attends as well in grade 2. Today we are joined by the newly created choir, consisting of 40 students from grades 2 to 4 for their premier performance. Leading the choir in a rendition of O Canada are choir directors and school teachers Karen Etherly and Sarah Lynn Hutchinson. I wish them all a warm welcome to City Hall along with their parents who have come to watch in the gallery. Colleagues, please join me in welcoming the choir of Bayview Public School.
Well, thank you very much to the students from Bayview. I talked to two of the students. One young girl came up and said, my parents told me to tell you they want their taxes lower and less bumpy roads. So I thank you for that. And I asked this other young girl, was she excited to be here? And she said she's here for the snacks. So great honesty amongst these young, talented singers. And thank you, Councillor Brockington, for inviting Bayview Public School to sing the national anthem. Well, at this time in our agenda, it's the City Builder Award, and it's being presented to a community association, the Trend Arlington Community Association. Board members are here. I'd ask them to come forward, along with their city councillor, Councillor Keith Eglai. And welcome, Sean and the entire team. I'm honored to name all of the 2018 Trend Arlington Community Association, or TACA, executives who are being recognized for their role in helping the community when a tornado touched down last September. Come on up a little closer, I won't bite. President Sean Devine, Vice President Robert Onley, Treasurer Julia Addison, Director-at-Large Lydia Pion, Secretary Allison James, Director-at-Large Mark Nivet. And have I missed anyone here? No?
Jackson.
Yeah. Former executive member David Beauchamp.
And David Beauchamp.
Bethany.
And Bethany, I'm sorry. I'd like to recognize the TACA coordinators and volunteers, and also extend a warm welcome to family and friends who are joining us here with this celebration. This award recognizes people who have demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to making our city a better place through volunteerism or exemplary action. Arlington Woods was devastated, one of many communities devastated by one of the 6 tornadoes that touched down in Ottawa-Gatineau on September 21st last year. The path of destruction and the loss of countless magnificent trees was a shocking loss for the entire community. City inspectors issued more than 100 unsafe building notices in the area following the tornado. About 50 homes in the neighborhood were severely damaged, many beyond repair, but thankfully, despite all of the destruction, there was no loss of life. The Community Association assisted the city with volunteer coordination and organized hundreds of people in the neighborhood to help clean up properties. In the days after the tornado, the association launched a crowdfunding campaign to support several short-term and longer-term relief efforts. The association also provided much-needed information and assistance to community members dealing with the aftermath of the tornado. They organized a memorial service for the community, facilitated counseling services, and worked with the city on replanting. In addition to assistance with basic requirements of food and shelter, their efforts allowed residents to have a support system and a welcoming meeting place. The association helped bring the community together during a very difficult time, and they continue to be a community focal point as recovery, rebuilding, and replanting efforts continue. The Trend Arlington Community Association supports and engages community members by providing information about what's happened in the neighborhood. And I know they've been very, very helpful in working with Councillor Egli, who worked tirelessly on their behalf during the tornado and afterwards. As life gets back to normal for its residents, the association continues to organize community events and bring residents together. The volunteer members are being recognized today for their dedication to building community spirit and fostering civic pride. The association runs the outdoor rink next to the community building and hosts signature events each year, including the Winter Carnival and the Neighborhood Garage Sale. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the association for their many contributions to the community.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the association for your many contributions to our community.
On behalf of Councillor Egli and all members of Council, to present the Mayor City Builder Award to the Trend Arlington Community Association. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can I sneak in?
Who do you want to sneak in on? Yes, I will. Thank you. Hello, everybody. So today was already a great day because of the award. I didn't know there were snacks on top of it, so it just got better. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Egli, not only for recommending us, which we very much appreciate, but for being a fantastic partner for our community. This really is, as you can see behind me, a team effort, and I would like to take one more minute of your time for acknowledging all of the team members by name. We have current Vice President Krista Graham, former Vice President Robert Onley, our hardworking Treasurer Julia Addison, Secretary Allison James, and then other executive community members, Mark Nivet, Lydia Pion, Bethany Jackson, and then former executive community member David Beauchamp. All of these people behind me, we are very grateful for the opportunity we've had to help our community through what certainly has been the greatest challenge we've ever faced. And there is still definitely a whole lot of work to do. although life is getting back to a new normal. To do this, we certainly benefit from the support of organizations like the Red Cross, the United Way, Samaritan's Purse, Arlington Woods Methodist Church, and of course the City of Ottawa, for whose support we're very grateful. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the city for helping us to rebuild what we still believe is the greatest part to live in Ottawa. And now I just want to invite our former Vice President Rob Onley to come up and say a few words. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a special thank you to members of our community, neighbors, and many fellow citizens across the City of Ottawa who came out, who stepped up and joined the volunteer efforts immediately following the tornado. To the many people who dropped off food, snacks, random items, and who donated their time, thank you. No one ever thought a tornado would hit our community, of course, but there we were, responding, reacting, and using every available tool at our disposal to help our neighbors. If there's one takeaway from this whole experience that I would share with each of you, it's this. Say hi to your neighbors, know your neighbors by name, introduce yourself to families that move in on your street, or to the person that you see at the bus stop every morning. Because you never know, one day you might be lifting branches off of their smashed house, or sharing a generator to keep the food from rotting in your refrigerator. We must continue to show love to one another in this way, and we're going to make our city a better place to live every day. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Trent Arlington. It's my pleasure now to welcome the players and coaching staff from the Carleton Ravens men's basketball team, the 2019 Youth Sports National Champions, to come forward. Let's give them a big round of applause as they come forward. Congratulations. Félicitations. And we'll ask Councillor Sean Menard, who's the councillor for Carleton, who could also be a basketball player, and Matt Fleury, our sports commissioner, to come forward. Now, some of you may have noticed I'm wearing a Calgary Stampeders jersey. This is from a bet with Mayor Nenshi, and we had to, the losing team mayor, in our case myself, had to wear a jersey at a council meeting and fly the Calgary flag outside City Hall, which is being done. So it's a little bit of irony that we're here celebrating the Carleton Ravens, who defeated the Calgary Dinos for the championship. So way to go, guys. So as we all know, the Carleton Ravens won the gold medal game of the men's basketball Final 8 in Halifax and taken home the W.P. McGee Trophy in 8 of the last 9 years. And we're extremely proud of these hardworking and talented athletes who added a 14th national men's basketball title to Carleton's record. The Carleton Ravens men's team have dominated the sport and brought new meaning to the term dynasty and have won 14 championships in 17 years, which is remarkable. This year, Carleton went 22-1 on the season and capped it off by hammering the previously undefeated Calgary Dinos 83-49 in the national final on March 10th in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, Dave Smart, who's not able to be with us today, has been the head coach since 1999 and has led the Ravens to 13 of the team's 14 championships. He recently announced his new role as GM for the men's and women's program at Carleton, and we wish him the very, very best. And also congratulations to Taffy Charles, who was named head coach of the men's team. Now, we had a great chance to chat and break bread upstairs just before we came down here. And I said that not only is the university very, very proud of your work and what you've done for the reputation of the university, but the whole city salutes the effort and the good work and the long hours of practice and training that you put in to becoming national champions. So it's my pleasure to proclaim Carleton University Ravens Men's Basketball Team Day in the City of Ottawa. And we're going to present this to, I believe, Mitch Wood is going to say a few words. Where's Mitch? Here we are. Right, come on and we'll grab a picture. Let's get in front of the podium here and then you can say a few words. Come on up, gentlemen. He's up here. I don't want in the front row. This one, so are you, man. Can we see you all, man? Born tall, born tall.
So I just wanted to say on behalf of Carleton Ravens men's basketball team, we'd like to thank the City of Ottawa for the immense community support that you guys provide for us, not just our team, but all teams and organizations in Ottawa who compete throughout the city. As a team, we have a duty to not only represent Carleton, but the City of Ottawa, and we take great pleasure doing that, knowing that we have the fan support and all the support of the city behind us, and that they feel just as passionate about competing in sports as we do. With that being said, we'd also like to thank everyone who's a part of us being here, all council members, and of course, Mr. Mayor Jim Watson, and we hope to see you hopefully again next year. Thank you.
All right.
Congrats again. Jump up there. Congrats again.
Take care. All the best.
Thanks, man. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Again, congratulations to Carleton, the Carleton University Ravens. So roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Luloff. Councillor Dudas.
Ici.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Suds.
Here.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Ici.
Councillor Kavanagh. Present. Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Fleury.
Ici.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Ici.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard. Councillor Cloutier.
Present.
Councillor Blais.
Here.
Councillor DeRose.
Here.
Councillor Moffat. Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Hubely.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
Le quorum est étienne, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci.
You have quorum, Mr. Mayor.
The process verbal, confirmation of minutes of the 6th of March 2019. Carried.
Carried.
Declaration of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Communications as presented. Regrets, Councillor Scott Moffat advised he'd be absent from the council meeting of March 27th, 2019. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Councillor Hubely and Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 2, Build Heritage Subcommittee Report number 1, the Community and Protective Services Committee Report number 2, the Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 2A, and the report from the City Clerk and Solicitor entitled Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for Items Subject to the Planning Act under explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of March 6, 2019 be received and considered, Mr. Mayor.
On the motion, carried. Following consideration of all committee reports and prior to the motion to adopt reports, Council will be moving in camera to receive a briefing from the City Manager on the City's succession plan. Committee reports, rapport des comités, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 2, rapport numéro 2 du Comité de l'Agriculture et des Affaires Rurales. Item 1, zoning bylaw, part of 2596 Carp Road, modification de règlement de zonage, partie de 2596 Chemin Carp. Councillor El-Shantiri has a direction to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, if I may, just a little bit to put in contact, we heard a lot from our resident about this item. We had 22 delegates in our committee, and most of the concern was involving the Ministry of Environment and the Conservation and Parks as responsible for the regulation and the review of the impact related to air, noise, and dust emission. The province required the applicant to obtain environmental compliance approval prior to establishing the use on a property. This approval has not yet been issued. So I want to clarify, Mr. Mayor, most of the discussion we heard on our committee was about the environmental concern with the Huntley Creek and other noise emission and the air. So therefore, I have a direction for our staff. After discussion with the Vice Chair, we both feel that staff in the planning, infrastructure, and economic development and the clerk's office be directed to comply the environmental concern received by the city on 2596 Carp Road zoning amendment between February 25th, 2019, when the report was published, and today's council meeting, and submit the comments via letter to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks as part of their environmental compliance approval consultant process. Mr. Mayor, I hope this will be a direction to deal with most of the concern we heard in our committee. All what staff recommended zoning amendment, the committee unanimously supported the zoning amendment, but the environmental concern, which is I can share some of those concerns, I would like staff to follow up with the ministry.
Okay, I don't, apparently the notification board is not operating. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Okay, so we'll go forward and deal with it after we deal with the consent agenda. So until we get that fixed, oh, it's working now. Okay. Okay, so we'll come back to the ARAC item number 1. Item number 2, Build Heritage Subcommittee Report number 1, application for construction at 103A Crichton Street. Nouvelle construction au 103A rue Crichton. Carried. I think Councillor Meehan and McKenney, if you can take your notices off because we're on other items now. There we go. Item number 3 is application for demolition and new construction at 518 Mariposa Crescent, a property designated under Part 5 of the Heritage Act. Démolition et nouvelle construction 518 Croissant Mariposa. Carried. Adopté. Community and Protective Services Committee Report number 2, rapport numéro 2 du Comité des services communautaires de protection. Item number 4, Vehicle for Hire Accessibility Fund, Allocation Plan, Fonds pour l'accessibilité des véhicules de location, Plan Allocation. Councillor Brockington and Luloff have a motion. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning again. I'm moving a motion seconded by Councillor Luloff, our representative on the Accessibility Advisory Committee, to ask the General Manager of the Emergency and Protective Services to approach our private transportation companies. Right now in Ottawa, it's Uber and Lyft, to review in the hope that the contribution that's made per trip, which is currently 7 cents, which goes directly towards a accessibility fund, be increased. I'm not suggesting a number at this time, but I certainly believe there is room to review the 7-cent charge after a number of years in operation. We did extensive public consultation on how to disperse the funds that have been collected with this fund, and approximately 33 issues were identified by members of the public, a wide range of issues that could improve accessibility issues. The committee recommend allocating those funds to 3 of the 33 issues, and doing rough calculations on the back of a napkin, each penny brings in about $100,000 towards these accessibility issues. We did have one delegation, very passionate member of the River Ward community, who spoke quite factually about a lot of the challenges from the disability community, those with accessibility issues, and there's certainly a lot of room for improvement in this city when it comes to serving those with mobility challenges. So we have nothing to lose. I think it's appropriate at this time to direct the General Manager to go back and simply have a conversation in the hope that we can review this surcharge that goes towards some very significant needs in the city.
Okay, so because a number of people wish to speak on this, we're going to hold this and continue on. So I just wanted to get the motion introduced. Okay. Next is FEDCO report number 2A, rapport numéro 2A, du Comité des finances et de développement économique. Item 5, Information Technology Subcommittee Terms of Reference. Carried. Item 6, le rapport général sur les services juridiques pour la période du 1er juillet au 31 décembre.
Report on legal services for the period from July 1st to December 31st. Carried.
Anything from the bulk consent agenda? On the bulk consent agenda is presented. Carried. Okay, so we'll go back to the first item, which is ARAC, report number 2, item number 1, zoning bylaw amendment, part of 2596 Carp Road, modification au règlement de zonage, partie de 2596 chemin Carp. Councillor El-Shandiri has a direction to staff, and I believe Councillor Meehan had a question or comment.
First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor El-Shandiri for his the extension, I guess, of the consultation. There has been a really large contingent of residents in the Carp Road area who have expressed a great deal of concern about what this concrete blanching plant will mean to their homes and their chosen place to retire. I was at the location, I have visited, and I concur that there is reason to be alarmed. I really don't think that residential neighborhoods are a great mix with heavy industrial. The homes were located there because it was light industrial, and I know on the surface it seems like this is this is a good fit to have this Kavanaugh plant in there. But if you examine what blanching plants actually result in, I think we are wise, and and it's a good thing for us to actually consider the overall impact of what this is going to be on not just Carp Road, that area, but the whole West End. So I want to congratulate our chair of the ARAC committee for tabling this motion for further consultation with the Ministry of the Environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Also I want to echo what my colleague, Councillor Meehan, said, and I think that being able to provide residents with the opportunity to ensure that their comments are considered through the MOE process, because a lot of what we heard was actually within that bailiwick and not necessarily land use. But I do have a couple of questions about the land use as well, and the Carp Road corridor, the community design plan. When I look at the land use designation for this area, I think it's pretty clear that, well, it says right here, land use designations, that there should be a gradual intensification of uses from the highway, from light industrial to heavy industrial, from north to south. And I just wonder from staff how, if there's not a concern, I mean, it certainly would be for me, if there's not a concern that that this gradual intensification is going to set, if we put heavy industrial use within this area, certainly setting a precedent. We've seen that before. We saw it in around Lansdowne. We allowed one high building, and then the precedent was, well, you can't just leave that alone. It doesn't fit anymore. So I just, from staff, I want to hear from you what your opinion is in terms of the next heavy industrial use that comes in and gets even closer to more intense residential area.
Each application to further intensify would be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment application, and each would be reviewed on its own merits. The Corporate Road corridor is recognized as a rural employment area, which does permit a variety of uses. So we would go through a similar public process for any further intensification applications that may come in.
So if residents who are further north are concerned, they probably have good reason to be then. if you're recommending this use in a light industrial area, which is heavy industrial use, I think, again, I understand, and you're not going to give me a different answer. It will be based on its own merit, but it will be the same merits as you're basing this application on. Is that not correct?
It should be noted that the light industrial zoning on the property has an exception that's being added. We're not completely changing the zoning from light to heavy industrial, so it's an individual land use that is being reviewed in this case for this particular property, and as I said, would be the same for any further application.
And when you look also at the objectives of this Carp Road corridor, one of them is to protect and enhance natural features. And Huntley Creek, as we all know, runs through the subject site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is it your opinion that allowing a heavy industrial use to be located just adjacent to this natural feature, that it doesn't compromise the objectives of the Carp Road corridor, the one being to protect and enhance natural features?
Through the zoning being recommended, there will be a buffer area beside the Huntley Creek, and it will be rezoned to open space to prohibit any kind of new development. Currently, the land adjacent to the creek is zoned industrial, but through this application, this buffer area will be preserved through this open space designation to further protect it.
And is that to protect it because you're allowing this batching plant to go in, or should it always have been protected?
The community design plan recommends that when there is a land use application in the area near a water feature, that steps be taken wherever possible to protect it. So through the direction of that CDP, we've recommended that that zone be changed to open space to protect it.
So if this were an application for light industrial, say a car wash, would you have done the same thing?
If the land use proposed did not require rezoning, they would just immediately go to the site plan control process, so there wouldn't be an opportunity to rezone it through that.
Okay, so the buffer, the open space, is being put in place specifically because we're changing this, or you're recommending that we change that you're recommending that the application be approved to change the use to heavy industrial, correct?
It is correct that we're recommending that that buffer area from Huntley Creek be rezoned open space through this application, yes.
But because it's a rezoning, and the rezoning is for heavy industrial?
If there was any rezoning application that was submitted, we would endeavor to protect the corridor through this measure, whether it were adding a heavy industrial use or any other kind of use.
Okay, but if it were light industrial, which fits within the CDP today and didn't need a rezoning, we wouldn't be looking at the buffer, correct?
Yeah, we wouldn't have an ability to do that through zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Willis, I guess my first question is for you, and it's because I know you know this. I have considerable experience with inappropriate abutting land uses one to the other. And in my constituency, I have a heavy industrial park, the Stevenage Park, abutting residential. And there is a large open space that is designated open space between the two uses. But we know that just, expanse of land doesn't buffer sound and, all of those other things from traveling. And I know that you have told me and you have told the community that I represent that this was something that was done many moons ago, but in today's urban planning world, that we would never have allow heavy industrial uses abutting residential uses, that does not represent good land use planning. So I'm just trying to understand why we would recommend this today.
So, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Brown can add more of the historical context on this specific instance. What the ministry's guidelines do require today, which doesn't exist in the situation we have dealt with in the councillor's ward, is that there are preset separation distances recommended in the ministry's guidelines these days, which we would apply between a residential land use and an industrial use of this sort. And those separation distances are gauged by how heavy a use that actually is. In the instance in the councillor's ward, if those standards were applied today, those uses would not be side by side. There would be a requirement for further separation distance in that situation. In this particular instance, both medium and heavy industrial uses, regardless of which one we picked, could be accomplished with separation distances on the site, and the zoning that we're putting in place would allow both. So therefore, it would meet the standards of today. I mean, it's always ideal when there's an intervening land use in between the two. That's optimal, but those conditions don't always exist.
Okay, I do think there needs to be a transition zone between heavy industrial uses and residential uses. That would just represent much better urban planning in my mind. You know, because I've been down this road so many times and seeing what happens with incompatible land uses, I feel sorry for the people that live in that CARP area, because I know that it's going to be terrible. The other thing that surprised me in this report is it says that the Ministry of the Environment is responsible for the noise. And I was looking at this chart and the plan, and the noise levels are startlingly high. I know that we mitigate noise at 60 dBA, and some of these noises are more than double that. That's a lot of noise abutting a residential neighborhood, and I know it's our bylaw that deals with it. So why do we sort of wash our hands of the noise issues? Why wouldn't we, you know, be concerning ourselves with creating this kind of incompatible noise?
Mr. Mayor, the Ministry of Environment, in their environmental compliance certificate process, issues industrial noise requirements as well as air emissions. That is their regulatory power under the Environmental Protection Act of Ontario, which supersedes our powers. And our power relates to only, and the legal staff can assist me on this, are a very narrow application of noise bylaws that do not supersede theirs. So the province has the ability to issue a permit that would override anything we would say. So they are the regulator in this situation.
They are what? Pardon
the
me?
Province is the regulator in those related to noise and air emissions.
Okay, and we are the recipients of the problem because it's our bylaw that has to address it.
Mr. Mayor, I would say that that situation exists in a number of areas. We have waste management, similar situations where the province is the regulator. This is not unique to that. I mean, that's why, Mr. Mayor, I think the Councillor El Shantiri's proposal about, you know, the city taking a position with the province about taking the concerns the public has raised and giving assurances that they have addressed those through the process, whether they be noise or air emissions, is an appropriate step for council within its powers.
Okay, and just one final question that follow-up to Councillor McKenney's question about the rezoning that you're proposing to open space and the land between the uses. Who owns that land?
The applicant.
Okay, and the applicant is willing to basically to create that and leave it in perpetuity as open space?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Your Worship. To staff, does staff believe that local residents' concerns about environmental impact are legitimate?
Specific comments with environmental impact have been varied. There's various different ones that we've received. Some are within the purview of the ministry. There are issues related to that have been brought up related to groundwater, which are being addressed through a permit to take water, which the ministry has issued with some mitigation measures in the event of any problems that are found. So it certainly depends. There are a wide spectrum, some of which have been addressed through the ministry, and we've considered all their comments, and we will be forwarding them on as per the direction of Councillor El Shantiri.
I think members of council have heard from residents in the community about air quality concerns, soil quality concerns, water quality concerns with the nearby creek, waste that's produced. Councillor Deans has raised noise. In the staff report, you acknowledge there's potential impact on water quality. You mentioned the Huntley Creek. Your mitigation is stormwater management. Low impact developments will ensure that the runoff from the site will not have a negative impact on water quality. So at least you're acknowledging there could be some water concerns. My question, hypothetical question, is if we believe that a zoning amendment application has sound land use arguments, but everyone has concerns about environmental impact, what's our recourse?
More generally, Mr. Mayor, and this would come up with any industrial approval we would ever grant in the City of Ottawa, where the nature of their activities may lead to a variety of outputs. The province has the Environmental Protection Act, which makes it a provincial offense to discharge into the natural environment at any level of exceedance unless they've been given approval by the province to do so. So the province is the regulator on these issues, whether it be water quality, air quality, or noise in this instance, and we expect the province to fulfill its responsibilities on this. We are limited to the land use question.
Right. Councillor El-Shantiri enumerated what he wanted to see the direction of some of the comments that have been raised to include to the province. Can I also be reminded what else are there holding provisions that were put on the actual zoning that certain things must be met? Can you just summarize those for us, please?
Staff recommended a holding provision such that the zoning wouldn't be in full force and effect until the environmental compliance approval from the province was received. That's related to the air, noise, and dust emissions, which Councillor El-Shantiri was referring to. There's also a further holding provision that has been recommended through an amending motion at the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, so that the zoning would not be in full force and effect until a transportation impact assessment is reviewed by city staff to our satisfaction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councilman.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. We've obviously received a lot of feedback from residents on this, rural area residents. I think there's been 200 letters of opposition so far and counting. I'm just wondering, did planning staff go out and visit the site and take the time to walk around the site?
Yes, planning staff have been to the site. Planning staff have also met on site with the community members in one of their homes, in fact, to discuss the issues on the file.
Okay, and in terms of the applicant itself, do they own other land in the area that might be more appropriate for this type of a development to go in?
Mr. Mayor, can I caution council that while I understand the intent of that question, it is not within your powers as a council to tell an applicant where to make their applications for. They're entitled to make their applications on any site they choose under the Act. Your decision is whether you allow that or not, but we're not permitted as a municipality to direct them, say, no, you can do it on, you have that site, you have to go there. That's not within our powers.
Certainly. Now, the question still remains, though, is there other land owned by the applicant in the proximity or area that could theoretically have this type of a plant?
Mr. Mayor, I'll only say the applicant is a major landowner in the City of Ottawa.
Okay. How many new trucks per day are expected if this is to move forward to full operation?
The transportation impact assessment is being compiled by the applicant. We do have some preliminary numbers which we can look up here, but the formalized transportation impact assessment is under development right now and should be submitted shortly.
Okay, I'll see if you can dig up an approximate number. In terms of the process, why wouldn't we wait for MOE approval before taking this step? And I know we've said, well, we're going to come back after we hear from them, and then that determine. But we've made a decision to say, yeah, we're going to go forward if they give approval. Can you wait if they give approval and then make the decision, or is that not normal process?
Mr. Mayor, it's not normal process, but the holding provision in the bylaw gives that exact effect, which is our bylaw takes no effect unless they can provide us evidence that they have their ECA approvals. So if they don't get them, they can't proceed with this use. So it effectively addresses the concern. The city is not getting ahead of the provincial approval. Our approval is tied to their approval.
And if they don't receive that approval, or they didn't receive municipal approval in the first place, is there a sense that there would be another application? Have they discussed that at all with planning, that there'd be another application for another area?
They haven't indicated any specific plans.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor El-Shantiri, I believe you've already spoken.
Okay, I was going to wrap up to answer some of my colleague concern, but if it's that case, all right. So.
Okay, so we have Councillor El-Shantiri's direction to staff. Agreed. On the motion, carried. Yeas and nays. Okay.
Conseil Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Menard.
No.
Councillor Moffat. Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse. Yes. Councillor Suds.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan.
Councillor. Sorry, you have to vote.
No.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Conseil Blais.
Oui.
Councillor McKenney.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
No.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Yes.
Conseil Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Mayor Watson.
Yes.
16 yeas, 6 nays.
Okay, motion carries. The next item is Vehicle for Hire Accessibility Fund. In the interim, I should point out that today is the 86th birthday of our friend Clarence Dungy. Happy birthday, Clarence. 86 years old, 86 years young. So on item 4, Vehicle for Hire Accessibility Fund, Councillor Brockington introduced his motion, seconded by Councillor Luloff, and I believe Councillor Suds, as the chair, I don't believe had a copy of this before today. So Councillor Suds, would you like to comment on this item as Chair of Community and Protective Services?
To clarify, I was circulated a copy yesterday, so I am aware. I did want to have the opportunity to ask Mr. DeMonte his thoughts. First of all, a question just to clarify when it was that he first negotiated the 7 cents, and then his thoughts on approach if this was to go forward, and the likelihood of being able to negotiate a higher fee.
Mayor, Council, after we debated the PTC report and you approved it, not long after we began discussions with the PTCs. At the time it was just Uber, then Lyft came into the market after. So it was negotiated there. Mayor, the challenge with the motion, and I had the chance to talk to Councillor Brockington, as you remember, as part of the debate, we had asked for legislative authority from the province of Ontario to be able to impose it in the Municipal Act. We've not heard back from the province, and so it is a voluntary fund, and so that will be challenging to go back to these organizations and ask to increase their their participation. That said, if council directs us to do that, we'll do that, but there is a risk. It is voluntary. I mean, I could come back with a significant increase, or I could come back perhaps with no more support, which hopefully is not likely. As I mentioned in committee as well when the question was asked, that said, when they did become operating in the city legally, they were very collaborative and stepped up right away to give their 7 cents accessibility fund that we have today.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Sudds? Councillor Menard, please.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I was on. I have them. I don't know how the system works. I was waiting to.
Councillor Menard, did you want to speak to this item? Go ahead.
Thanks very much. So I think this is an important motion for us. We're not saying it's going to go up, but we're saying we have the authority and power to go and talk to them about it. I think it's important councillors know that in New York, Uber and Lyft pay a $2.75 per ride surcharge. In Chicago, they pay 72 cents a ride. In other parts of North America, they're paying much more than what we ask them to pay here. So there's precedent for asking for a bit more. It doesn't hurt us to ask for more. And I think we've got authority as well to regulate these companies that other municipalities have done. Some of them have said, look, you're not welcome here at all. And that's the authority we go to say is, look, this is reasonable based on the infrastructure that you're going to start to be, that you're using in the city of Ottawa to make a profit. We know that Uber and Lyft affect our regularized taxi license service. We know they affect our transit ridership to a negative extent. And so there are offsetting issues here that Uber and Lyft present that I think this motion makes perfect sense to go and make the ask of an increase, which is very, very minor compared to what other municipalities have in place right now. So I'm in support.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. This is a good allocation. I have no objection to it. When would the department begin to consider whether or not a different allocation might be appropriate? Is that a couple of years from now?
As part of the debate, Mayor, there was no specific council direction, but yes, normally we would be coming back to committee in this term and saying that it's been out there for some time. Perhaps we should look at this item, but there was nothing defined in the previous council direction, and when we approved the operation of these type of services.
So it'd follow our normal policy review timelines.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing before the end of the term of council how the money actually flowed and how it was used, so we can make a determination as to whether it's still the most appropriate a couple of years from now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Monsieur Demonté, je vais revenir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Demonte, unfortunately, I left before the end of the vote. My concern was really linked to the list that you've prepared. You prepared 4 criteria for the allocation of funds. Did you take into account other types of allocation? And my question also is to support paratranspo's requirements, or did you give us an account of all the criteria? During the public consultation, Your Lordship, certain criteria were to be examined, and during that consultation, 6 criteria were established: accessibility, security, availability, affordability, sustainability, and the steering committee afterwards took all the analysis and made a request to all departments concerning the feasibility of those criteria. So what you have before you is the result of the public consultation and the steering committee's work. And in the end, the recommendations that you see today are follow that process, and it is also, and that analysis also took into account the money that was available, and that is why there were 33 recommendations. 4 were not really included in the process, and the rest of the analysis was done so that we know where we can take the money so that it's the best impact for the community. Paratranspo was concerned. It was established the Paratranspo was doing pretty well, and that the money was to be allocated to other programs. I understand that. What I find better in this analysis is that you have chosen 4 criteria. I respect the motion that was adopted by the community, but were there other elements of Paratranspo that had to be taken into account other than the application? There was a discussion, Your Lordship, to add cars to the Paratranspo group of cars. So the money that we have collected could have been invested elsewhere. Paratranspo is already very functional, and the little money that we had, it was recommended, and that's what the public was saying, that it should be invested elsewhere. So that's why there's no other criteria than the software. There was a motion that Paratranspo is going to be taking care of that need. And to clarify all this, if it's adopted by the Council, you're going to come back with the results analysis at the beginning of 2020. Well, we'll see with the chairwoman, but yes, we want to come back to you early enough because we want this analysis to be an analysis that will be efficient. So it will be 2019 or 2020, and 2020 and 21. Your Lordship, I'm not going to support this report for contextual reasons. When we decide that an industry is not applying accessibility, I respect the committee, but I really desire that we invest more in Paratranspo. And I think I know that it's going to be adopted by the Council, but we should invest more in Paratranspo. I'm not going to be supporting this recommendation. Well, I'll see in a year, and I'll see what the committee will have propose and see if it really reflects needs. I know it's going to be adopted by the Council today, but it's very important for me, that we invest in Paratranspo, which is the accessibility program of the municipality.
Put your name at the bottom because you're going to wrap up on your motion. So, Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just while we were having discussion here, I reached out to Councillor Luoff and also the chair, and was hoping to make a friendly amendment to this motion so we can tackle the problem in 2 ways. And I looked to the clerk's office for a bit of help with the wording, but essentially to amend the motion to direct Mr. DeMonte to request of the province, again, the authority to negotiate, in effect, give us that leverage. The last time we asked was a number of years ago. It was a different government. So this would give us 2 opportunities, if you will, to remedy this situation. Again, as I say, the chair is in favor of that approach, and Councillor Luoff as well. So I asked Councillor Brockington, as the mover, whether no, I'm not saying instead of. I'm in addition to or prior to negotiating. Ask, I turn to you, Councillor Brockney, but I think it gives us 2 kicks at the can in that regard, and maybe gives us a little bit more oomph at the table.
All right, so we'll let Councillor Barrington answer that in his wrap-up. Does anyone else wish to speak on the item? Okay, Councillor Brockington to wrap up, and if you care to answer Councillor Aguilar's
Sure, just on that immediate item, we have a new provincial government, so I think it's germane and appropriate to approach them and remind them of this issue, and you know, we have to advocate from as many angles as possible, so I think that's fair. Just on my motion and another question for staff on some other items, you know, we're the capital city of a G7 country, and we have allowed Uber and Lyft to operate in Ottawa, and they're not providing accessible service to their clients. And the compromise with that deal was that they would make a contribution to an accessibility fund, and our independent consultants who assisted staff for years said it should be at least 30 cents. And we settled on 7. So this is go back to the table and have a conversation. It doesn't say go back and get 30 cents or 80 cents or $2.75. It says go back and have that conversation. Are there risks? Of course, but I think it would be a public relations nightmare for Uber and Lyft not to at least have a conversation with the general manager. And I think he now has evidence of what that fund can help support. He has a list of 33 items generated from the public that can benefit from that fund. So I think it's in everyone's best interest to have that conversation. I think it's wise for council to approach the new provincial government on giving us that authority. So I think that's very, very wise. Just on another item, we heard from a delegation both in public and who provided us lengthy written comments before the committee meeting, and they raised a number of issues with respect to the availability of accessible taxis, the challenges at times that accessible taxis have not shown up or refused to pick up an actual fare, and the fact that accessible taxis are not available 24 hours a day. Can I get a sense from the general manager how we're going to address this going forward?
Yes, Mayor. Aside from this file that we're discussing today, we had heard the same thing from the community. We began an investigation process. Charges have already been filed against some of the plate holders, and the investigation continues. Chief Chapman and the bylaw regulatory team are aggressively looking at this issue because, as I mentioned at committee 2, for me it was twofold. Let's see what's going on. Let's resolve that challenge, and then let's relook with the community once that's resolved. If these plates are available, do we have a challenge? Because what came up at committee is, do we have enough, et cetera? And the data right now is not there to support it because there appears to be an issue with the plate holders and their availability as per the bylaw regulation. So we're intervening on a regulatory side. As I said, charges have been laid and others will probably be laid. And once we have that, we're able to analyze that, we'll be back looking at that more broadly. If I may, while I have the microphone, if the friendly amendment is there, I would suggest, after consulting with the clerk, if you want to go back to the new government, instead of me, it would be more appropriate that the clerk, on your behalf, go back to the government and ask again for legislative change. I think that would be more powerful. But obviously, we're at your disposal for that item.
I'm open to that. I'm not sure if that was the intent of Councillor Eagle, but I'm going to accept the recommendation of staff because I think ultimately that's what we want. We want legislation provincially to be amended to give municipalities this power and authority. I see Mr. Manconi here. There was an interesting point at committee. The delegate referenced the City of Vancouver. When their paratranspo was running late, she said 15 minutes or more, they automatically call on an accessible taxi to fill and help in. Do we have any types of partnerships where if paratranspo here in Ottawa is running significantly late, if someone's appointment is changed, their plans during the day changed, and rather than making them wait several hours, what are the other options to improve that service?
We have a mixed service delivery model, so we have our own vans, and then we augment with the with the private sector in terms of the accessible sedans and so forth. And there's a constant balancing of that act if there's a shortage and so forth through the control room. The thing we heard loud and clear is we're not pushing out our notifications, and then hence the request for a smart app and things like that, or where's my ride and so forth, which is going to be done. And we're going to think about how quickly we can get there. So it's a balance of those things, but to Mr. DeMonte's point also in terms of the private sector delivering those services, and we've always advocated for them having more drivers and making sure those vehicles can run as long as they can. So they have the plate to make sure there's an operator in that vehicle because we want to push that service and do any trips that could be canceled or late.
Good. So just wrap up, this is the first time the committee and council is being asked to identify and disperse the funds that have been accrued in this accessibility fund. It will be reviewed again at committee within probably a year, and I do think, as my motion indicates, it's appropriate for our staff to go back to our two main private transportation companies to have a discussion on the contribution to this fund. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Councillor Eglai had indicated that he would, I think you would see this as a friendly amendment, that the clerk on behalf of council forward council's request from April 2016 for additional legislative authority to the new provincial government. Is that friendly to you? Okay, so on Councillor Brockington's motion, seconded by Councillor Luloff. Carried. On the main report as amended. Dissent by Councillor Fleury. Okay, thank you. Disposition of items approved by committee under delegated authority, suite à donner des articles ratifiés par les comités en vertu du pouvoir délégué. Received. Councillor Dudas, seconded by Councillor DeRuse, has a motion to move in camera.
Be it resolved that the rules of procedure be suspended to permit the receipt of a briefing from the city manager with respect to the city's succession plan and organizational alignment, and that the consideration of any associated motions and recommendations by council in open session, and be it further resolved that city council resolve in camera pursuant to the procedure bylaw 2019-8 subsections 13.1b, personal matters about an identifiable individual including staff, 13.1D, labor relations or employee negotiations, in order to receive a briefing from the city manager with respect to the city's succession plan and organizational alignment.
On the motion, carried. So it'll take us a few minutes to get all the systems turned down. So we'd ask members of the public and the press and those staff who are not required by the city manager to please